Coming up next on the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
I think where there's a need and a specific environmental advantage, so maybe, when the temperatures are up and you would need a slightly harder coating or fly size generally, if you're fishing super big flies and things are changing in terms of the way that people are approaching fish, then that'll develop, a line is probably specific to that purpose. But we don't want to just develop lines for the sake of developing lines.
That was Gareth Jones describing the Airflo plan to simplify your fly tying selection process. Tactical tapers, universal tapers, power tapers, and the rage. Today on The Swing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how you doing today? Thanks for stopping by the show. We just kicked off a big giveaway this week, and you can check it out right now at wetflyswing.com/zag. That's ZAG. And this is your chance to get a $100 certificate at Zag to buy anything you want over there. We're giving away a local fly fishing trip, and we got a couple other bonuses on tap. So check it out right now. Join that giveaway and get a chance to win a trip and some gear. Today's episode is sponsored by Dalton at Country Financial, who thrives on helping families and community members through the power of education and proper insurance coverage. The unexpected will happen, so it's always best to make sure your assets and life are protected. You can check out Dalton right now at wetflyswing.com/country and make sure you are protected today. Today's episode is sponsored by Eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton Territory, one of North America's most renowned zones for fly fishing. From the Henry's Fork to the South Fork of the Snake and all the alpine lakes in between, Yellowstone Teton Territory provides anglers and other outdoor enthusiasts all the information they need to plan their trip. Visit wetflyswing.com/Teton right now to get a full list of outfitters, lodges, fly shops, and all the inspiration you need to get started on your next Eastern Idaho trip. That's wetflyswing.com/Teton, Teton. Gareth Jones is here today from Airflo to break it all down. We dig into a lot of the tech behind Airflo, their unique fly lines, what they have going, what makes them special, and we break down the poly leader system, get into that, find out why that's such an important and killer product they have going. And we also clarify some of their process to simplify like I said at the start, to simplify things and make it easy for you to grab the line you need to get started, whether that's salt water, cold water, warm water, whatever that is. They're making it easy to get started. Gareth has a cool story and a long history in the fly fishing space. He's been all around the world and has been doing some great stuff. So I'm excited to share this one with you. Without further ado, here we go. Gareth Jones from airflowfishing.com. How you doing today, Gareth?
Oh, well, thank you. A little bit rainier in the UK, but we don't have to go outside today, so it's all good.
Nice. That is so cool. It's I always think of you guys because I'm in a rainy spot too. We get where I live, we get almost 100 inches of rain a year, and I think you guys probably get something probably in that neighborhood, right? I'm not even sure. What is the transition, the metric transition?
Oh, I have no idea. But all I know is that we had a month's worth of rain in 24 hours this week. So yeah, it's a bit dank and wet out there right now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, you got to embrace the suck, which is one of my guests recently said, when it comes to this time of year. But we're gonna dig into Airflo. You've been there for a long time. I'm excited to talk about this because I think you're somewhere in the 30-year range at a company that produces a really unique fly line, and I know a lot of people that use it. I have a couple of your lines I've used for steelhead fishing and all of that. But before we jump into Airflo and some of the products and things there, why don't you take us back really quickly to fly fishing and tell us how that first started for you?
Well, yeah, my father was a fly fisherman, and I grew up right next to a small trout stream. So natural progression, picked up Dad's fly rod, started teaching myself to fly fish. Dad wasn't the best teacher in the world. He was a red-headed gentleman who, didn't have much patience, but he stuck with it and got me over the line. And then I sort of really got into stillwater fishing as I got a little older. and I really liked the bigger fish. That was the thing. So I got into the stillwater scene, and then from there I got onto the competition scene. I really enjoyed the competition stuff. Got quite good at it. At one point, I was the youngest national champion in the UK. I won the national championships my first attempt at 19, so that was quite exciting. And then that led me into Airflo. I was doing my degree. I did a business degree at Swansea. And it was, where do you go next? And I started throwing out CVs to different tackle companies. And Airflo said, coming up and have an interview. So I didn't look back.
That's it. No, I love it. In competition fishing, we always love digging into that. We've had a number of guests from the Team USA on the program, and I always try to dig in because it's such a Euro nymphing, of course, and all that is so popular over here, and we'll probably talk about that today and just the evolution. So we might hold off on some of the comp. I'd love to dig into that as we get in today. But let's take us back really quick to Airflo because I don't want to miss that as far as the story and the company. You've been there a long time, but I know at the start, talk about who was behind Airflo, how did it start, and then and how you kind of connected to it there.
Okay, so the guy who invented Airflo Lines was a guy called Paul Burgess. And Paul was an incredible engineer. He had a job in a water authority where he was designing, systems to track pollution and with water systems in the dams in the UK. And then he ran a mail order company called Sir Burgess, which some people may have heard of, back in the 70s. But Paul, being the engineer, wanted to develop fly lines, and he took a look at the existing technology of the day. And he'd also seen the way that they manufacture electrical cables, which was via an extrusion process. So Paul decided that was the way the fly line should be made, and he started on this path where we made some crazy fly lines to start with. We went through iterations of complete non-stretch cores. We had a lot of memory issues in the early lines. And I think it's fair to say that some of those early lines didn't live up to the hype that we may have given them. But we are 30 years on, and we've come a long way with what we developed. So
right on, yeah. And you guys have been, like I said, I've got some of your lines, and I know you're all over the world, obviously. But it started now. In which country did you guys focus on? Like where did that start, and then where did it spread out from there?
Okay, so we're based in Wales, and obviously we're UK biased, but we look a lot into the Scandinavian market where some of our technologies really work well. A lot of those guys are fishing with very accurate grain weight heads, and Airflo are able to make heads which are accurate within a very, very small window. So we really, really fit into that market well. And also anywhere where durability is an issue, sort of the saltwater environment is really strong for us because our lines are made out of polyurethane, not a solvent-based plastic. So polyurethane is far less susceptible to sunscreen, gasoline, and more particularly DEET. So all those things that you find in that environment which can damage product, we're kind of immune to. So it kind of fits in really well in that environment.
Gotcha. So that is one of the big differentiators between you guys and a lot of the other lines is that, the polyurethane versus the PVC type. So describe that a little bit on the tech there. So it is just go into poly and maybe describe some other features of how you guys are a little bit different because I don't think any of the other major manufacturers are doing polyurethane. Is that true, or I'm not sure if you know that?
That's correct. We're the only guys who manufacture lines with polyurethane. Polyurethane is a plastic that doesn't require any solvents to make it liquid. So in the manufacturing process, we just heat up the plastic, we change its shape basically into a fly line through an extrusion method, and then we set the temperature we set the plastic through going through a cool temperature through a cold water bath, and then literally it's just reset. So it's melted, it's changed shape, and it's reset. Whereas with other manufacturing techniques, there'll be a solvent added to the material to make it soft, and then that solvent then is baked off, which will then make the line hard when it turns into.
Gotcha.
So it's a
Gotcha. Wow.
complete 360 in terms of the manufacturing technique.
Yeah. And remind or talk about the extrusion. What does that mean? The extrusion process.
Okay, so extrusion is where we, if you think about our fly lines being made like a sausage machine, so you're pushing out sausages. Okay, and it would be like you force plastic through a screw.
Yep.
And then it comes onto the core at 90 degrees. And then depending on the pressure of the plastic or the speed at which we manufacture, we can create tapers. So it's a bit like a corking gun. If you cut the corking gun with a large nozzle or a small nozzle, and then you increase the pressure, you pump out, then if you draw the cork gun at a faster pace along the seam you're trying to weld or seal up, then obviously you can make a smaller diameter of the cork. So it's a very similar process.
That makes sense.
You speed up, slow down, increase pressure, reduce pressure, and the combination of those is what gives us the tapered fly line.
Yeah, that's it. That's a great analogy to use with the cocking gun or the sausage. So that's perfect. All right, so we got the general gist of what it is, and we're going to dig into some of your lines. Talk about the U.S. because I know you guys you've been here a while. We had growing up for your information. I was in. I've been around for a while here. My dad had a little fly shop back in the '80s, right, through the '80s, '90s, and stuff. But I remember, I can't remember exactly when you guys came in, but talk about the U.S. market. And I know like Echo, right? You were, Ray Jeff is a big name over here. I think you were affiliated with kind of the Echo team and that changed. So talk about how you guys kind of came to the U.S. and then what's going on now and where you're looking moving ahead.
Yeah. So initially when we came to the U.S., we came in as Airflo, and that was using a distributor based in the USA. Initially, we used a company called Angler Sport Group, who were the first guys looking after Airflo. Then an English guy called Ian Sorrell took it on for a little while before Tim Ray Jeff got involved. And that was a big change for us and something that really sort of gave me a lot of input as well from my side because, hanging out with Tim, he's one of the most infectious characters in the industry. He's super effective at casting and he really understands what makes rods, lines work together, that combination. So hanging out with Tim was just, a great experience.
Yeah.
And having that association as well with Echo really brought Airflo to the US public, whereas before we were really sort of like a marginal product that was obviously popular in the UK, popular in Europe, but kind of wasn't mainstay USA. And having Tim involved really brought us in front of people.
That's it. Yeah, and Ray Jeff is he's probably one of the, everybody knows him as one of the great fly casters in the country and stuff. So, I'm just UK versus US. Why is there it seems like there's such a big difference. Like we do, obviously we steelhead, we got all sorts of species we're fishing, but is there that much difference between the style?
There is a huge difference in terms of the way that we approach our fisheries and very much different to the way that you guys do in the US. The two-hand salmon thing was obviously a big thing in the UK for a long time. Especially done in the UK with a lot longer headed lines, not shooting heads, not Skagit style. And then with our trout stuff, it was generally still water biased in the UK. So if you take, for example, the best-selling fly rod in the UK, it would be a 10-foot 7-weight fly rod. Whereas if you take the best-selling rod in the US, it'd be a 9-foot 5-weight. So there was a very, very different approach. US definitely far more sort of river-based, and UK was definitely more still water. But that was the big difference.
Yeah. And it's interesting because for some people that have been doing been in fly fishing like myself, I love stillwater fishing. There is a nice segment of the U.S. and I think maybe it's growing. It feels like you could probably speak maybe more to that, but I've always loved stillwater fishing, and the lines I've always used are just, your general whatever, kind of like your 9-foot 5-weight and stuff. But I'm getting into more of like the Phil Rowley, Brian Chan stuff where they're doing some other things that are newer. So is the stillwater fishing here, do you think that's different than what you guys have going over there? Like, again, back to the gear?
Not at all. I think that the stillwater fishing in the US is probably the biggest opportunity for anglers right now in the US. Especially where you get to the situation where you've got high numbers of people on the rivers, overcrowded. But the problem is, when you turn up at a lake, it's really difficult for somebody to just take a look at what they think is a still piece of water and go, where do I start? If you go to, you can see a pocket, you can see a seam, you can see features. And those features exist on lakes. It's just a little bit more. It's not quite as visible to the sort of untrained, let's say. So, they do exist. You can catch a lot of fish on still water. You can narrow it down, but obviously it needs some education.
That's right. And I'd imagine because of the comp fishing, I mean, you probably are pretty much a stillwater master as well. Is that something, when you look at stillwater versus like rivers, is that kind of your sweet spot just as an individual?
Yeah, definitely. It's something I'm known for. I've fished competitively for the last 30 years. And, I've been lucky. I've fished a couple of world championships. I got a few medals at world level. So yeah, I kind of love the stillwater. I love stillwater fishing. But the point I was going to make is that you need subsurface vision to be able to read it. And you need to be able to put your mind's eye where the fly is. And this translates to a lot of fishing. Anybody who can read what the fly is doing at whatever depth it is will catch a lot more fish than somebody who doesn't really think about it.
Yeah, right. I was just thinking, we had Phil Rowley. I mentioned he's a friend of mine. We've done some trips out here, and he's kind of up in BC or up in Canada.
I know Phil well.
He's kind of Phil Rowley. Well, I just talked to him yesterday, and we were talking about we're setting up a trip. We're trying to get something down in the U.S. Just get out and get on the water and do some stillwater fishing. But yeah, he talks a lot about his strategy. I would love to maybe dig in with you and talk about, if we were going to set up a trip, for some stillwater fishing, like you mentioned the rod and stuff like that. But what like if somebody's going to pick a Airflo lineup, what would you recommend? Or do you guys have a few different types of stillwater lines?
Literally, it depends on the situation at the time. There isn't one stillwater line. That's the one thing I will say is stillwater fishing is all about depth control. The ability to present consistently at a set level will result in a lot of fish getting caught. If you go below the fish, you're out of the game. If you go too high above the fish, they're lazy. They don't want to travel to go and collect food. It's all about effort versus reward. So the more times you can present consistently in front of the fish's level that they swim at, the more success you're going to get. So I can never say there was one line. It's always there's always a best line for the day in the given conditions. So yeah, there's certain lines you'd always want. Like you'd always want a floating line because that gives you control of depth, and then you can control the depth of the flies. You'd always want an intermediate line because that gives you some variation in the water column. And added to that, I'd want a sort of 3 to 5 inch per second sink grade line as well, where I could cover a little bit more depth, and hold it at a level longer.
Okay.
So if it was down to 3, they're the 3.
Yeah, that's the 3. That's the 3. And what are those lines? If somebody's just going to go Google search like on Airflo, would you just type in
6?
What would you if they? Yeah,
6 cents is the family of lines that they fall into. They all fall into it, and 6 cents come from. It's a name I come up with because the lines have only got 6% stretch in the core.
Okay.
And stretch in fly lines, particularly when you're not seeing a rise or, indication that fish is eating your fly, is super critical because if you can feel it, it's a little bit like comparing a super braid with monofilament in the conventional game.
Yep.
It's a step up.
Yeah.
And it gives you that feel and ability to hook set at some distance and depth.
Yeah. So what I want to jump into, we're going on this line. I want to try to cover everything with Airflo. Of course, we won't be able to today because you guys have so much and there's so many different types of fishing. But another big type of fishing we do up here where I am is steelhead fishing, and it's similar to Atlantic salmon in some ways. But like you said, Skagit lines are huge. And we're heading up to the Midwest I'm on the West Coast, but we're heading over to the Midwest to like the Ohio area to fish with Jeff Liskay and some folks. We're going small there, right? We're going like smaller river, smaller, tight Skagit stuff, almost like they call, I guess it's like trout spay almost, right? Shorter rods. Do you guys have lines that cover that? What would you recommend if that's what we're doing?
Yeah, we do have lines in that smaller grain rates, shorter heads, but it's something that we're working on a complete new range for the later on in 23. With the new developments in technology that we literally just put a new manufacturing line in, and that gives us a lot of advantages for that large variation in diameter. So you'd have, where you go from a thin running line to a thicker head, then that having control over that is really critical.
Yeah. So that is a line, and the one line I think about, again, it's a little different, is the fist, right? The FIST fist line, which I think was I have. That's one of the lines I've used for. I want to say, was Tom Larimer involved in that development?
Tom's involved. Tom is still involved, and Tom helps us with our two-hand design.
Oh, he does. Oh, gosh. See, I didn't even know he was still. So that's cool because Larimer, of course, he's, I love Tom as well. And he's, I think he just moved. That was the interesting thing because I think now he's with, he moved from G. Loomis over to St. Croix. Yeah. Yeah, St. Croix. So how does that look with your folks? So you got, we mentioned Ray Jeff. Now we got Tom. I mean, do you have a crew of people around the U.S., around the world that are your ambassadors, for a better word?
Yeah, we do. I still have Harrop as well, who's an ambassador for Airflo. And globally, we've got a lot of strong, not just strong casters, but strong people in the industry in each of the territories who, real strong influencers. So it's, important to get people who know what's going on in their market,
Yeah. What's the and we're kind of jumping around here, which is what I love. I love kind of cover things. But so you mentioned saltwater. What's the line if somebody? And again, there's probably a few different ones. But if somebody was heading out for like the Grand Slam, they wanted to go do bonefish and tarpon. Yeah.
We took a look at all of the lines that we do, and we came up with a strategy. We feel right now as the market is kind of convoluted with a line thing from tarpon down to
Yeah, it's confusing a little bit, right? There's so many options.
Yeah, so we took a look at it and we said, well, look, let's look at it on skill level, okay? Very much down to what an angler is capable of generating in terms of line speed. So balancing up ability to taper is what's going to make the rod work for you. So we've got three tapers we present. We've got a tactical taper, which is your technical, light, true to line weight line, long belly, long front taper for the guys who can really, deliver high line speed and cast way, or they're in like real calm conditions where they've got opportunity to present, single fish, long range, long leaders, that kind of stuff. Then we've got the universal, which is your all-rounder. It's quite a powerful line, usually weighted slightly forward. Best part of half a line size heavy. So it's going to give you some quick load of the rod without excessive line speed. And then we've got the power tapers then, which are the heavy guys. They're like 1.5 line sizes up on the FTM scale. They load up really easily, and if you get a conditions where it's really windy, or you're just starting off and you want to get that feel of the rod, then that extra weight makes up for the lack of line speed and allows you to load the rod. So that's kind of the strategy we've taken, rather than go and say, well, this is your 7 mile per hour tarpon line, on a rainy day at this temperature. Then we're going down this really simplistic approach and trying to make it easier for the consumer to understand what we're doing.
No, that is, I love that. So, and then if we take it down that road a little bit, so if you had a beginner that's going for the 9'5" weight, what would be the taper you'd give them?
Definitely go for the power taper, because if you're a beginner, you're not going to have line speed, so you need to feel the rod. If you're not generating line speed on the line, it's not going to load the rod. So you can make up for that lack of line speed with additional weight, and that's what you get with the power taper. Also, the taper design is such that there's a larger tip diameter. So that carries a little more energy into the leader, especially when people are starting. They want to be able to turn over the fly. If you can't turn her over, you just may as well not bother, So that larger tip power taper also carries the leader over well. So, it just gives everybody a chance. And I always say to people, fly fishing is not like golf. When you start fly fishing, you don't always catch fish. At least if you're golfing, you can knock it and go somewhere. So
right.
We like to give people a chance, at least of presenting well.
Gotcha. Are you a golfer, or is that one of your sports?
I can hit a golf ball fairly well because of the casting. But I wouldn't call myself a golfer.
Right. You've been on the course though.
Yeah, I think there's a real sort of definition between what a golfer is and what I am.
Yeah. I find that all these interviews, I've done over 400 of these types of interviews with all sorts of, experts in fly fishing. And there's always, it seems like the professional sports is this common theme. Like a lot of people I talk to were very good at certain sports on top of fly fishing. Do you find that to be true, that people that it's just like, that's one of those things that makes you a better fly fisherman, actually having some sort of athletic ability? Or, I imagine there are people that aren't great athletes that are also good fly fishermen, but what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's hand-eye coordination, you either got it or you haven't, So if you got it, and you can move, and if you got speed as well, particularly for the casting, it's either you got a lot of strength. Like if you take a look at the Rage Fs, you've got Steve, who's super powerful, big built chap, who's strong, and then you've got his brother who can equally as far, probably half the size, but it's super fast. It can move his hands quickly. So there's the kind of two types of athletes you're going to get,
Today's episode is sponsored by Drifthook, who has pre-packed fly assortments for every stage of your fly fishing journey. Each kit is organized by species and includes instructional videos and easy-to-follow guides. And I've got a few of these Drifthook fly boxes, and I can tell you from experience, these are super well organized. I've got a Euro nymph box, which I'm excited to dig into here as we start getting into the season here. And also there's a streamer box I have and some dry flies. And the cool thing is Drifthook organizes it, and their content they have on their website, which you can check out at drifthook.com, just goes through everything and really breaks it down. So if you are new, not sure what to grab, or if you just want to get some Euro nymphs or some streamers where everything's ready to go, you don't have to worry about choosing things. You can check out these boxes right now. These are fly shop quality flies, and they're hand-tied and inspected before being carefully packed into their durable, double-sided, water-resistant fly boxes. It's a good package, and it's worth the time to check it out, and check out Drifthook right now. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/drifthook. That's DRIFTHOOK. Grab a box and support this podcast and a great company with one easy click.
So you mentioned tactical universal taper. So continuing on down this road. So we talked about the beginner. So what if you were obviously a spay, if you're going longbill, people know what that is. But what if you were, well, I guess the Skagit stuff, let me just guess, right? You got the Skagit, so that's more of your power taper, right? If you're getting a short line, yeah.
It's slightly different because what you've got really is you've got the Rage, which is our, more conventional line, which isn't for heavy sink tips. Then you've got the Skagit, the driver, which is your heavy sink tip line. But a lot of this then comes down to line's tip diameter, So if you take a look at a Scandi head, let's say, and you look at a Rage head, on paper, they're not particularly different, but the dimensions of them, where they end up, are very, very different. And what that means is that if the tip diameter is large on the line, then that's the energy that's left in the line that can turn your flies over. So lines with a larger tip diameter are better for, powerful presentations, big flies, windy conditions, all of those things. The larger the tip diameter, the better for you. I would like to think of lines as a tube, I always think of a line as a tube that I throw a big ball of fire down the tube. And the rod is generating this ball of fire, and it sends it down the tube. And then the front taper, as the fire is coming down the front taper, this tube is getting smaller and smaller. And the size of the aperture at the end is the amount of fire that can come out of the end, the size of the fireball. So if I've tapered this aperture all the way down to a real small diameter, then there's only a little tiny fireball comes out, which is great if you think of like your dry fly presentation.
Subtle.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're thinking of power, then the larger the tip, the larger the ball of fire that's left, and that's what's going to knock those flies over and get you that super straight sort of presentation, regardless of the wind or condition.
Gotcha. And the rage is, and that's the line. I may have said this wrong, but so is the fist also in your line, or is that another deal?
No, fist is also on our line, and the fist is a triple density line. So that's more to do with, look, it'll cast well, but it's more to do with angles of presentation and getting drift. So if you want a line to fish deeper, then by presenting, instead of having all of the head floating in just the tip of the sink that you've added on sinking, then you've got a more of a direct contact where that sinking section can get below the flow and just get you deeper and slow the presentation down low. So yeah, that's where the fist comes in.
That's the fist, and the fist stands for floating intermediate sink tip, right?
Correct. Yes. Very effective casting line as well, because you're increasing density as you go towards the tip of the line, the whole thing speeds up. So the line is thinner at the front end because of the density change. There's less resistance to that line cast through the air, and there's more speed in it. So yeah, it's a very effective casting tool.
Yeah. And the rage I love because, again, I think that was maybe one that Tom Larimer helped out with. And he told the story. We had him on a few years ago, and he told the story. I think he was on the Deschutes or something, and some guy was out there, and it was a hot summer day out there in his underwear or something like that. And he was off of a rock shooting a cast across a country mile across the Deschutes. And he went up to him and he said, "Hey, dude, nice work, nice cast." And he was fishing a rage. He could tell, right? He knew it was a rage line. It was a pretty funny story. But so the rage, I love the rage because I am not a great fly. I mean, spay casting has always been a struggle for me. I'm good enough just to get the line out there. So the Scandi, sometimes when the wind's blowing, is tough for me. And I'm definitely not the long belly guy. I have goals to get there. But the rage, when I got that, I was just like, whoa, why is this so easy now? So describe that a little more. Why is the rage, how does it make somebody like me who's not like a pro good at casting a spay line?
It's exactly what I've just explained. So the fact is that carry more energy for longer. So if you have a long taper, you could have the same taper length on both lines. But what matters is what the tip diameter is at the end of the line, because that's the amount of energy that's left in the line to turn over. And in the rage, particularly, it's a large diameter tip, which has got enough energy to just go and power over those tips, or long leaders, or whatever you need to do into the wind, or on crummy days. And usually it does. It usually picks up in the afternoon, and the nice cast you were doing in the morning all turn to junk in the afternoon, and that's where the rage really steps in.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so basically it's pretty simple. It literally is how big of a diameter is the tip of your line, and the bigger it is, like you said, the more you can just shoot it out there. You can
change the shape of the loop by changing taper. You can, but then you've got to add into the fact, what's the caster's ability? Because like when you start adding line speed into the equation, then that changes everything. So there's always this balance,
right?
Line. And it's a big lesson I learned a long time ago. Me and Tim Rejeff used to make lines that we thought were fantastic. And we'd both go out and cast them, and we go, yeah, these are the best things we've ever made. And then we'd put them into the market, and people would go, no, I don't like that. It's junk. And what we realized is that we were making lines to our ability. And it was a huge learning when you take a step back and you go, okay, this isn't what the market wants. This doesn't work for the consumer, doesn't work for everyday anglers, and we just got to tone it down and make sure that it works for everybody. So that's been a good learning curve.
That is an awesome reminder. I was just thinking as you're talking about that, just on like R&D, and I know Ray Jeff has a couple of videos online of him stretching the Echo rod in a machine, right, until it breaks. And it's just like, it's pretty interesting to see because Echo's known as one of the toughest rods. It's not even the most expensive, but it's a super durable rod. How do you guys do that with your R&D? I mean, when you get a line out there, do you go through a big R&D, or do you just know because of the PU process that you're bomber, you're not worrying about anything like malfunctioning?
No, we do. We test everything. It's like you can't be complacent with anything, because we even test it to the level of when materials land here from external suppliers. We've got to be sure that what we're getting is consistent, so that when we make things, that they're consistent and we get the end results that we want. So at every stage, things are tested. It's a big part of the process. And as for product development, you get you get an idea, people will come to you, or you'll get an idea and they'll want a line that does a certain thing, and then you go through your back catalogue of what do we do in certain situations to create a line that does something similar. That's your sort of starting point. Then you start messing around then with different hardnesses of plastics, because we can change the stiffness of the plastic across quite a large range. Has a huge impact on the way that the line performs in cold conditions, warm conditions. Is it going to become too gummy? Is it going to become too stiff when it's cold? And if it's too stiff in certain parts of the line, then that will cause you problems with loop formation. So you're always factoring all of these different layers of and with Airflow's lines as well, we use what we call a co-extrusion process. So there isn't one layer of plastics, there's actually two. And the reason that we split them out is because we feel that when you have one layer, you're always trying to make sort of compromises on what it does. If you've only got one layer, you've got to make the one layer be super smooth, got to shoot really well, but then on the other side, it's got to bond to the core. So, like when you're thinking you put in slickening agents, then that doesn't necessarily form the best bonds with cores. So what we do is we most of our line is made with the inner layer, and that controls density generally, contains most of the color, and contains the adhesion between the core and the coating. And then there's a secondary skin that all happens within a fraction of a second of each other. The co-extrusion is all in one die head, and that provides the harder layer on the outside, and the skin, which is the contact area with the fly rod. So yeah, there's a huge range of things to consider when you're designing lines.
Yeah. So that is it. And then you have the outer layer. What does that look like when it's actually you're fishing it? So you've got this line. Do you guys, I'm not even sure, is cleaning a line, is that still something people should be doing on a regular basis?
Look, honestly, I don't.
Yeah,
me
neither. Me neither.
In terms of the line, like the co-extrusion, if you took a look at the line, you couldn't tell any difference between single coat and double coat. It's only when you cut the line cross section and you put it under a microscope, you'd be able to see that there's a secondary layer. So it's not immediately visible to the eye, and because it's made the same materials, they effectively become an homogeneous coating anyway.
I see. So what you're saying is, cleaning them. I mean, if the line's out there, saltwater or just whatever, dirty river conditions, not a big deal.
Yeah, I wash my lines down after the salt. Any line will perform better if you give it a little slickening agent. They will naturally. You're reducing the friction in the guide. So yeah, do it. But I've not found the need to on our lines. So
yeah. How long will, this is probably hard, depends on how much people fish, but what's the average fisherman, I guess, the weekend warrior? I mean, they get a line. How long is that line going to last before they need to think about replacing it?
Okay, so with polyurethane, I'll tell you a story. There was guys in New Mexico who had one of the original Airflo lines, and they sent it back to us. And there was a little letter inside, real nice letter, saying that this is one of the lines you give us at the start. It's been our car park casting line for the last 17 years. We'd like you to see it. And it just highlights that polyurethane is super tough and doesn't really get... Look, you can still damage a line. You can still cut it with filament. Like, people like the most damage you see from fly lines is where people have wrapped a nylon leader or fluorocarbon leader around it and cut into the line. So yeah, you can, but I can cut it with the scissors too, you know. But in terms of
right, exactly,
you're going to get years out of a polyurethane line, and you'll probably end up replacing it out of boredom rather than the need to.
Right. And do you think that's different? I mean, with the opposite, right? The PVC lines, is that a different process? I'm not sure how much you know about that. Are those lines, do you have to replace those sooner?
I know quite a bit about it, but look, PVC lines, they are susceptible to UV, they're susceptible to DEET, they're susceptible to sunscreen. So all those things that you put on them, they will draw out the solvents. So when the solvents leach out of that line over time, that's what makes the line crack. So if you think about PVC as a paint, and if I painted a window, on the first day, that window looks fantastic. And that's because there's elasticity in the paint, and the paint will stretch as the wood expands and contracts, then the paint will do the same. But over time, the solvent in the paint will just leach out. And then over time, the expansion and contraction of that wooden window is still doing the same. And then after a lot of time in the sun, it just breaks down and starts to crack. And it's very similar process with the coatings on the other lines.
That's it. And I going back episode 328, we had an episode with Jarvis from Monic Fly Lines, and they're kind of a more of a small, they're actually a cool company. I love what they have going. They have a unique process too. Very similar, right? Are they doing a similar deal as what you guys have?
Yeah, I believe they are. I think this is very similar. They'll be using extrusion, and they'll be using similar methods of manufacture as Airflo. Very similar.
Yeah, exactly. And he mentioned on that one, mentioned you guys, and I think said that you're the only ones. Why is it that, because there are a number of other big companies in the U.S. and probably, I'm guessing, around the world that don't use I mean, why do you think that is, that they're not more? Is that just the tech maybe don't have the engineering to do it, or what would you say about that?
I'd say it's probably more historical. If you've invested heavily in a technology for the last 50 years, then you've probably the machinery you want to run it that way. We came along with this stuff over 30 years ago. We started in 84. And also, it's not the sort of thing you can just walk into a shop and buy a fly line machine. You've to go and develop stuff. All of the technology that's in-house is things that we've developed ourselves. So there's a lot of in-house know.
Yep.
So yeah, it's not an easy process.
Yeah. So just like you guys won't be switching or adding PVC to your line, for obviously a number of reasons. But yeah, you would have to come in with a bunch of machines. Obviously, it sounds like. Yeah,
that would be the case if
the whole process.
It's something that you've developed your process. It takes a long time to get. There's a lot of things that it's a bit like rubbing your head and tapping your stomach at the same time. It's there's a lot of things to get.
Yeah, that's hard to do. Nice. Well, this is good. I think we have a little bit of a kind of a primer on. I mean, what else are we missing here? I mean, you guys, like, as far as the types of fishing, do you kind of cover it all, or what aren't you covering? I mean, because there's all sorts of, like, people are fishing. I mean, we do episodes every week, and we got somebody fishing for carp in the middle of Arizona. Fly fishing is so amazing now, right? Because you can fish for any species all around the world. How does that look for you guys? Are you trying to target that, like everything?
Yeah, we will. I think the strategy we're taking right now is to make things simple for the angler. We think that there is too much out there, and you can go and buy a carp line, but you could also buy a regular universal taper and do just fine with that. So I think where there's a need and a specific environmental advantage, so maybe where the temperatures are up and you would need a slightly harder coating, or fly size generally, if you're fishing super big flies and things are changing in terms of the way that people are approaching fish, then that'll develop, a line that's probably specific to that purpose. But we don't want to just develop lines for the sake of developing lines. We want to make things that are really worthwhile, technically superior if we can. Otherwise, there's no real point in making it.
Right. No, you're trying. It sounds like you guys are trying to simplify it, right? Like have your 3 different tapers, and those could be applied to
Exactly.
salt or and then you go into, and then you might have a specific line you need as you dial things in. But why make it more confusing? It's like the space stuff. I think a lot of people always feel like some people like it's very confusing. There's so many different types of Skagit and Scandi and all this different stuff. But really, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be that confusing, right? I mean, you could probably just go grab a Skagit line and go fish it. As long as it bounces, you'll be okay.
Yeah, sure. Look, it's when you come to 30 grain increments on Skagit heads, it's real fine detail, and it will make a difference to the guys who it makes a difference to. But generally, they're at that upper level. But if you're at the lower level, then as long as you got something that's going to load the rod well for you, then you can have fun.
Yeah. What's the welded loop is such a just a everyday thing now. I mean, back in the day, I was just talking the other day about the nail knot, right? I mean, the nail knot was, I still use it. And somebody actually, the meat eater guys, we had him on. We had Joe Cimelli on, and he mentioned, we talked about the nail knot. But the loop is just everywhere. You guys, right? Tell me about that. Was that something you guys created back in the day?
Yeah, my colleague Richard Waters, back at the time, he invented the welded loop as part of a polyleader project. So that it wasn't originally on fly lines. It was a method of welding a small tapered tungsten tip. And we took one look at it and we said, hey, this needs to be on fly lines. And then we had to go through the process then of building it into our everyday manufacturing, which was tough, because you can imagine how many fly lines we make. And this wasn't an automated process back then. This was literally, we live in a town which has got a large army base. Okay, there's the point of the story, and the army base is the Gurkha regiment is based here, and when the Gurkhas come over to train in the Brecon Beacons, they bring their wives and family. And it turns out that the Gurkha wives were very good at doing these welded loops. So we ended up with, at one point, over 100 Gurkha wives welding fly line loops for us. So that was like literally our lines would go out on a weekly basis, and then they'd come back on a Friday. Some of them would smell quite funky because the Gurkha curries are pretty strong. So occasionally get a little bit tasty. But that was how we processed it back then. All of that stuff is all automated these days, but back then it was quite a mission to get it done.
Today's episode is sponsored by Anglers Coffee. With more than 40 years of experience in coffee, the Anglers Coffee team roasts a full range of coffee with one goal in mind: delivering excellent coffee to every single angler. Responsibly sourced from farms using sustainable growing practices, you can rest easy knowing you're doing your part. Roasted and shipped within 48 hours to assure freshness. I definitely know when I open up a bag of Anglers Coffee, this is going to be the best thing that I've tasted for a long time. For me, when I open up that bag of Anglers, I know it's going to be super fresh, and it is going to be probably the best thing I've tasted all day long. So you got to check that out in the morning. This is, if you want to step up to not only amazing coffee, great taste, but know you're doing your part. Joe and the Anglers team, that he's got it going. He's always got something new going on from the Artist Series. They're doing some stuff right now. From the Artist Series that they've done to right now, they've actually got a new bass blend, which I just purchased over to Anglers. The bass blend, you got to check that out. I was just over there. They got a mayfly blend, which is cool. And then, of course, some of the standards that they have, the muddler blend and some of the other good stuff. Check it out right now. If you go over to wetflyswing.com/anglers, you can check out everything they have going on right now, and you can get a little taste and even check out the dry dropper on the go tea bag option. Joe really loves this, and this is a little bonus they're putting in. If you want to really simplify the process, check out the dry dropper, some hot water, grab this tea bag and drop it in. You're good to go with some coffee. Add a little creamer, maybe some honey, which I like to do. If you haven't tried honey, give it a shot, and you're good to go. like we said, Joe is the man. He's got it going. Great coffee, great taste. When you pay for this coffee, it's a little bit more expensive than just your run-of-the-mill stuff, but it's going towards good causes, whether that's conservation or just connecting with local groups. Joe always has something positive going, and you got to check him out right now. wetflyswing.com/anglers. That's ANGLERS to make a change and get a taste of great coffee today. Okay, back to the show.
So you got and you mentioned the poly leader too. So that is another game changer. I mean, I've used the poly leaders. Describe that poly leader. I'm not sure if that's still something you guys are doubling down on, but talk about how you would get a poly leader, how that works.
Okay, so we love poly leaders. Poly leaders are, in my mind, the best way of connecting fly line to tippet, and I'll explain why. Okay, so if you made the ultimate fly line, okay, it would go all the way from the belly diameter all the way down to tippet diameter. That would be the optimum. That would be the ultimate fly line, okay? And the reason being is that would mean that the material used for between the belly and the tippet is all of the same flex modulus. So when you're making a casting loop, you're going to get a casting loop which is smooth all the way through because you're not fighting to bend material. Okay. Now, when you take a look at a monofilament leader, when you match up the butt diameter of the leader to the tip diameter of the fly line, which is technically that's the right thing to do. You take the tip diameter of the fly line, then you taper it down to tippet diameter. But the thing that's missing there, or the thing that causes a problem there, is that there's a massive difference between the flex modulus of the fly line, which is really easy to bend, and the flex modulus of the butt of that leader. So you end up having to use a lot of energy from the end of the fly line to bend that leader to create a nice tight casting loop. Now, what a poly leader does is effectively creates that 5 to 9 foot section in between the fly line and the tippet, but it's made of the same material as fly lines. So it's got that same flex modulus. So it's very easy to bend and very easy to transfer energy to the tippet. The other thing with poly leaders is that we can change densities. So you can go from a floating poly leader to a type 7 sink rate poly leader. So for the traveling angler, no need to carry a sink tip, no need to carry, just take your floater, go 3 poly leaders, loop them into the fly line, attach your tippet, and you're ready to go. So yeah, they're super versatile. The two-hand guys, particularly in Europe, they love them. They really got a hold of them, and they like that system. But it really is a versatile. I'm thinking more these days for streamers. Just getting that fly down there without having to get a full sinking line on. Really, really effective for that.
Right, float it. So, and how long are typically the poly leaders?
Okay, so they're between 5 foot and 10 foot long. There's a complete range. We do them for line sizes 2 to 5, 5 to 7, salmon, steelhead, the whole gamut, huge range of them. And it's literally just about attaching the tippet then to the end, which makes it really simple. The latest versions, the Poly Leader Plus, actually come with a small 1.5 mil tippet ring on the end. So it's just like tying a piece of tippet onto your fly. So yeah, very effective. The other thing as well, which is interesting, is that in the floating density, they've actually got positive buoyancy. So for mending indicators, whereas your leader would generally sink or you'd grease it, then you can keep mending all the way down to the indicator, so you get far better control over your drifts. So it's quite a good product. Needs a bit of needs a bit of love in the US.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I've used them, and it's the idea makes total sense. So, I mean, you pretty much should always be using some type, either it's a floating poly leader or a sinking, would you say?
Yeah, I will. The only time I'd not use a poly leader is when I'm fishing sinking lines on a stillwater. And that is primarily because I want the fly line to control the depth of the flies. And I just want to, like, a lot of times I'll fish short up to the fly line just to make sure that the fly line is actually pulling my flies to depth. But any any sort of floating line presentations, right? Trying to create an angle off the end or trying to create more depth or just to get really good presentation. The floating pod lead is exceptional.
Yeah, the floating, that's it. And I love it. And that's the one that I've used probably most often, is just throwing on the floating poly leader on there. Good. Well, I'm trying to think now. I want to make sure we cover everything. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight, either maybe coming up, in the coming years, you want to shout out, or anything that we haven't talked about that are big products for you guys?
Well, the only thing I'd like to talk about is the ridges on the lines and what that does, and why our texture, like we invented textured fly lines.
Oh, wow.
Or rather, we were the first guys with commercially available textured lines, I believe.
Okay.
So SA has shark skin, but prior to that, Airflo had the ridge line, and the first ridge line was literally it was longitudinal ridges running along the full length of the line, and what it looked like was if you imagine a cross section of the line looked like a bike cog, looked like a crank off a push bike, and those ridges did a great job of reducing friction in the rings. They certainly cast really well, but in their original format, they was quite aggressive. And, when you were stripping flies back in saltwater or wherever, then you would get some grooves. You could get finger grooves off it. The great thing about it, though, was that it reduced the tangles significantly in saltwater. I remember I took a group to Cuba. We did an exploratory trip to Isle of Youth when it first opened up. And there were 6 anglers on the trip, and we were really lucky. There was a tremendous amount of tarpon around, and we hooked up upwards of 250 tarpon for the week between us. It was insane. But during that week, we only had 6 tangles in all that action, which was mind-blowing, and that's where I really felt the ridges sort of set us apart. The other thing with the ridges, because they run the full length of the line, they don't actually cross the rod guides, so there's no noise.
Oh, so there's no noise.
You've got the benefit. Yeah, there's no noise with the ridge line. So that was the original ridges with that bike cog shape. But we revised the ridges about 2 years ago. We came out with Ridge 2.0. And what we did with that was we reduced the number of ridges, so we created larger voids in between. And what the thinking there was that if there was any grit or dirt getting caught up in the line, it would get washed out quicker. And also we changed the shape. So instead of being a spike, it was more of like a flower petal kind of profile. So it's very subtle now, the ridge. It creates incredible line speed, because if you've got lack of contact with the guides, it just allows the line to slide up through the guides really quick. It's really, but you're getting that advantage. You're getting the advantage of no tangles, super line speed, and incredible slickness, but without any noise. So yeah, it's a big thing for us.
I love that, because we were just up in Alaska. We had Scientific Anglers had, I think it was their amplitude line, and I think they were textured. And I hadn't used a textured line prior to that, and they did make sound. And actually, it was kind of cool. It was like, oh wow, this really makes a sound. It's almost like when a fish is spooling you up on your reel. Are you a quiet reel person, or do you like the loud noise? You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of quiet on the reel. I like to hide to let people, don't let them know there's a big fish screaming off. But so I think some people maybe like the noise, right? But some people, probably a lot of maybe more don't.
Yeah, for me, if there's any noise created, that's obviously friction. So I'm all about reduction.
Yeah, so that is friction. So literally having noise creates more drag.
It's actually because there's less points of contact. The sharks can cast really well, and any textured line will reduce friction. But having a texture that runs along the length of the line and doesn't create noise is obviously creating less.
Yeah, even less. Okay, good. Well, no, I'm glad you highlighted, because that was a question that I kind of had been thinking about a little bit. So. And cool. If people have questions as far as digging more into this on lines, what do you recommend for people? Like if they're out in in the U.S. somewhere, and they just don't know what to get, so they're thinking, they're going for one of the saltwater species. What do you tell them?
Look, universal universal saltwater all day long. That's the line. The universal lines have been designed for 90% of the market, whether it's the universal trout or the universal saltwater. That's where the game is. And then what you got on the peripherals then is the power taper, which either will make up for wind or lack of line speed. And then you've got the tactical end, which is for your top 5% super, effective casters who can generate line speed at distance, and they've got the longer bellies then to take advantage of it.
Gotcha. So if I was going for, let's say, redfish down towards Texas, the universal for me would be fine, but it might be good to also have maybe more of that power in case there's some wind. Would it be good to have all three potentially?
Well, look, we also created a redfish line, which is kind of a beefed up version of the universal with a slightly less hard finish on it. So the plastic is a little softer because of the temps that you're fishing in. It's not a full tropical. It's kind of like 80% of the way there. So again, we dial in the plastics on the skins by fishery, by temperature range. So we're always to optimize,
By fish. So you do have that. So if you want to say, hey, I'm going for, you don't have every species in the world, but you do have the ones that are really popular ones. You have it by species.
Right. Yeah, we do. We do. And that kind of highlights, one of those situations where you do need to have something a little different. The tropical line would work and it would cast really well, but it would be too hard if the water temperatures dropped. So you'd end up with too much line memory. And that's where a specific redfish line actually comes to the fore.
There you go. Okay, perfect. Well, I think we'll send, if people have questions for you, we'll send them out to, to Airflo. Like we said, well, you got two. You got the Airflo USA, right? But either way, it's going to get people to the right place.
But if people ask questions, feel free to send them to me as well. I'm happy to answer things.
Okay, so if people have questions like directly, like right now, they want to pick up a line or just want to pick your brain more than what we talked about today, that'd be good.
Feel free. Yeah.
Okay. No all right. Perfect. Well, we got a couple more to take it out of here. I want to, I usually like to hold the end for some random questions just to make it fun here. So you talked about a couple trips. I mean, with yours, you've been doing this a long time. Have you just been loving have you been traveling? Do you do a lot of traveling around the world, like fishing? Is that something you do a lot of, have done a lot of in the past?
Yeah, I've been very lucky. So I started the job. I left university. I came to work for Airflo. Then I left for a year. I went to the dark side. I was a trainee accountant with Revlon Cosmetics.
Oh, wow.
So, complete role change. And I came back to Airflo. They offered me a role, which was like a technical guy here. And then an opportunity came up. I didn't realize, but nobody wanted to go to Australia in the senior staff. And they asked me would I go. They wanted to set up a new distributor.
Yeah.
So I went. I loved it. And then from there onwards, I spent about 3 months a year traveling. It was just incredible. And the coolest part about it was in all those situations, I was meeting fantastic anglers, super high skill set, were really happy to share their knowledge with you. So I was like this sponge who just traveled around the world, sucking up all this stuff from different parts of it and seeing what they did in New Zealand, seeing what they did in Scandinavia. And that's one of the things I love. I love the way that you can take things you learn in one fishery for one species and then transpose it to another. It's, there's been things I've learned in tarpon fishing, which I've applied to UK stillwater fishing, would you believe? And really caught a lot of fish as a result of it. So, just these learnings. I just love this continuous learning that you get. I say I've been the luckiest guy. I've got to fish with some real legends as well. I've fished with Rene Harrop a lot over the years, and people like that really inspire me because, despite his age and despite the sort of fishing he's done throughout all his time, he still wants to learn. And any techniques I bring to the table, he's so quick to go and take them on and try them and see what he can add to it. So I say, I've been very fortunate.
How do you who I'm not familiar on that. I didn't get that name. How do you who is that again?
Oh, okay. So there's a guy called Rene Harrop who's really famous on the Henry's Fork.
Oh, how do you spell it?
Rene, R-E-N-E,
Yep.
Harrop, Harrop.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Perfect.
So yeah, and then, I've been lucky as well to fish with some really good guides, and listening to what the guides say is quite critical, because they get to see everything that works, and also on the opposing side, they get to see everything that doesn't work. So listening to your guide is kind of, you'd be a fool not to listen to him.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The guy, I mean, that's always the good advice. You go to a new place, get a guide for at least a day just to make sure it'll help your learning curve. Awesome. Well, this has been, a lot of fun. I want to just take it out here, just kind of in the stillwater, go back to that. We talked about that story. Like I said, I love stillwater. We're doing some trips this year where, in fact, we are hoping to get out to maybe the Idaho area somewhere and find some good stillwater areas there. But give us some tips. So again, some of these, you can keep it high level if you want, but if somebody was heading out just generally stillwater fishing, what do you tell somebody, or what do you take from your comp fishing that people can maybe utilize that are listening now?
Okay, the most important thing, and it sounds crazy, but find the fish.
Yeah.
Absolutely have a plan to find fish. Fish will generally be in areas where there's food, food and comfort and close to hand safety. So think of areas where you're going from 5 to 10 to 15 feet depth. That contour line is where they like to feed, because they'll come into the shallow water, which is generally richer, with the thought that if anything goes wrong, they're going to drop off into deeper water and have safety very, very close to hand. So always think of that. Then think about how the food is getting pushed around. So the wind on still water is the flow on the river. So always think of where the food is going to get blown, and then generally start looking in those areas for feeding fish.
Yeah.
Fish will generally give you an indication fairly quickly. If there's a fish there, you generally get a take quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get another take in the next 5 minutes, then move until you do. It's like, don't just sit out because you had one little opportunity. You want to find the fish, and there will be a massive fish somewhere, and that's due to that. That's where the concentration of food is. That's where the fish are. That's where they're going to be happiest feeding. So it's all about finding the fish, finding the food, and keep on the move.
Yeah, keep on the move. And that, as we've talked about that quite a bit on our stillwater episodes, is just like, how do you find the right depth? When I was out with Phil, we kind of tried a bunch of different depths until we found out where they were at. Do you typically, with your stillwater stuff, do you do a mixture of types? Like, do you even do some of the indicator stuff, or what's that look like?
Yeah, we will do. We'll fish all styles. But my thought process on that is start at the top and work your way down.
Okay.
Fish will generally rise up the column to take something, whereas they don't generally go digging in the mud. They'd rather have the fly presented at eye level or above, slightly above. So don't be in a hurry to go and put a super fast sinking line on. Work your way down into it, and use the countdown method. Count. It's really important. If you can get that subsurface vision and you can count to a depth, and repeatability is, and that's from my competition side, it's all about repeatability. If you can, the situation is there in front of you. The solution for the immediate future is going to be whatever it is. Once you found it, run with it.
Yep.
But then prepared to change, because with pressure, the fish will either move or they'll drop lower in the water column. So then you need to go dropping the flies a little deeper, or move to another place to find another, active feeding shoal of fish.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's great tips. Those are awesome. Love that on the stillwater. So nice. And what do you? So we mentioned golf, kind of joking around there. But what do you do when you're not designing? Digging into the fly line stuff. Do you have any hobbies, stuff that you kind of do on the side that's not fishing related?
I'd like to say yes. I've got loads of hobbies, but the truth is I don't. I fish pretty much 365 days a year.
That's awesome.
I'm one of the lucky people in the industry who's never lost the passion for it.
No,
even though I'm surrounded by it every day. I just love there's so many different facets you can find within fly fishing. Like we're fortunate in the UK. We've got, I'm surrounded by great still waters. I'm surrounded by great rivers, all within 30 minutes of the house. I can fish for trout. I can fish for pike. I can fish for carp. I could fish for grayling in the winter, which is kind of what we do. So there's always something to do, and we don't really get iced over here, so we just get rained off.
Yeah, rained off, exactly. Yeah, I think you guys are probably a pretty similar latitude from where we are. You know, like I think I think you're right across the country. But no, I mean, have you seen that? I mean, because the passion thing is interesting, because I kind of feel like, you know, I mean, I just love the future of looking ahead. You know, I mean, you've done probably a lot more traveling than I've done. But I mean, do you know people in the industry that really you saw they lost the passion? They just kind of like got out of it or got burned out?
Yeah, I have. And it's sad, you know, because, you know, you just wonder what's gone wrong. But, you know, it's life, I guess.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I'm just really happy it didn't happen to me.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, I think that's what I love about the podcasting, because I think everybody I talk to for the most part is pretty passionate. You know what I mean? They're like fully into it. In fact, I had a guy on, Joe Jackson, Sergeant Bass Fisher.
Okay.
Shout out to Joe. I mean, this guy he's got his passion is in like tying deer hair flies, right? But he has this crazy story. I mean, the guy's he's a young guy. He was in Afghanistan, the war stuff, but like literally had a heart attack recently, and he's a young kid. He's got all this stuff going on. Yet when you hear him talk, I mean, he is so passionate about doing what he does. Like he's like, dude, I can't wait till they let me get back to fly tying. You know, he can't even tie flies right now because he's lost the strength. But it's just this powerful. I mean, that's what it is. It's like, and it sounds like you have it as well. That must be the people you're around. You see that on the other end, right? The people in the industry that have the same passion as you.
Yeah, and I'm surrounded by like-minded people here at Airflo. I've got a couple of staff here who are crazy mad fishermen. I got one guy here, Kieran Jenkins. He's probably the top competition angler in the UK right now.
Oh, wow.
Watching him come through and develop into, you know, an exceptional talent is really exciting, and it's obviously drives me to keep on my toes, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got some young crew. This is there's not all old white guys at the office, is what you're saying. You got a mix of people.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm the older.
Are you the old one around the office there?
I'm the oldest one in the office. I'm 52, so.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You're still young though. That's great. Look at that. So that's amazing. Awesome. All right, Gareth. Well, we'll send everybody out to airflowfishing.com, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions for you, because you know there always are with fly lines. So I'll direct them that way. But yeah, thanks again for all your time today and shedding some light on Airflo. Definitely excited, and I want to say thanks for the products, because I've been using your guys' stuff for a long time. So it's been awesome, and definitely look forward to keeping in touch with you.
I really appreciate it, Dave. Really enjoyed the call. Thank you.
So there you go. Another big one in the books. wetflyswing.com/386. 386 will get you the show notes and links, some of the stuff we talked about. Maybe there'll be a bonus video like we always like to throw in there. Maybe one of a favorite tune. Maybe Dom's going to throw in one of his favorite videos that's good today. Quick reminder before we get out of here, zag.fish. You can go to wetflyswing.com/zag. Enter to win this $100 gift certificate to purchase anything at Zag, and also get a chance at a local fly fishing guide trip. We're putting these up, and we're going to be doing more of these as we go, but this is your chance. If you've been wanting to get on the water with a guide, we're gonna have you covered if you win this trip, and we got a couple other little bonuses to check it out. We got Peter, who won the last trip. He's going to be coming on the podcast soon to share a little bit of his story. So it'll be good to hear him, hear what he has going, and to hear what it's been like being the big winner of the big trip. So I'm excited to share that one with you as well. I'd love to hear from you. If you get a chance, you can send me a message anytime, DM on social at wetflyswing, or send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, and let me know where you're coming from, how long you've been listening to the show, and if you have a topic or guest you'd like to hear from them, if you reach out to me there, I will put that together for you and do my best to make it worth your while. I guarantee if you connect with me, I will put together an episode for you. So we're going to get out of here, and we are going to get on to the next task we have at hand. We've got this giveaway rolling this week, which is definitely a lot of fun. Hope you have a chance to go over there on Instagram and click that like button. Let us know you're out there on social. That'd be great. And it would be really awesome if you win that trip. That's my chance to get on the water with you, and I hope that I'm able to do that this year. If I can't, definitely connect with me online, on social, anywhere there, and I'd love to, at a minimum, say hi and connect with you through that venue. All right, we're out of here. Another night, another day in the books, and it is nighttime here now. So I'm going to wish you a good evening, a good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And I'm glad that you've been here with us today, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.